I drove 600 miles across 3 states to see my father's last apology turned into rubble. The bulldozer was still running when I got there, idling beside what used to be our family's old lake cabin. The woman in charge, hair-sprayed stiff lipstick like wet paint, clipboard in hand, looked me straight in the eye and said, "You inherited the problem." She had no idea that along with that cabin I'd also inherited the one secret capable of burning her entire little HOA kingdom to the ground. The last stretch of the road to Finch Lake was a narrow ribbon of gravel cutting through pine woods. I'd been driving for hours, thinking about the man I hadn't spoken to in 40 years, my father. An engineer like me, but one who could build anything except a relationship. When he died, he left me this cabin, no note, just a deed in a manila envelope. I didn't come here for a vacation. I came to see what he'd tried to say in wood and nails instead of words. But when I rounded that final bend and saw the bulldozer, everything went cold. My brain refused to register it at first. Piles of timber shingles, glass, and that old stone chimney from the photo still standing like a gravestone. I stepped out of the truck boots, crunching gravel, and the smell of diesel filled my lungs. The woman detached herself from the crew, perfect posture, platinum bob, catching the sun. "Can I help you?" she asked, the kind of tone that meant the opposite. "This cabin," I said, my voice catching. "This is the Bannon property. I'm Joe Bannon. I just inherited this." Her red lips twitched into a smile. "Well, Mr. Bannon, welcome to Finch Lake Estates. This structure was deemed unpresentable and in violation of our community's aesthetic standards. It's a visual hazard. A visual hazard." I stared at her then, at what was left of my father's life. "You can't just demolish it. I have the deed. I just got here." The board exercised its emergency condemnation authority, she replied smoothly. "We protect community values here. Community values." Watching her smirk, while my father's last attempt at peace was fed into a wood chipper, something inside me cracked. I clenched my jaw, walked to my truck and said, "Then I'll see what the county thinks about your emergency." I drove straight to the county building downtown. The clerk behind the counter looked up my parcel and frowned. "There's no demolition permit on record," she said. My pulse steadied. I asked her to print that. She reached for the mouse, and then a woman with glasses and a stiff haircut appeared out of nowhere, pushing her aside. "Let me handle this." She typed fast, and suddenly, boom, there it was. A new entry. A permit filed less than an hour ago. My stomach dropped. "I wasn't there a minute ago," I said quietly. She didn't look at me. "It's right here," she said, smug. "Everything's in order." I walked out in a daze. It wasn't incompetence, it was a setup. They'd forged it. Darla Ream's HOA president had someone inside the county office. I sat in my truck that evening watching the bulldozer tear through the last wall of the cabin until nothing was left but dust and ash. My father's last words gone before I could even read them. For a long time I just sat there in silence, engine off, staring through the trees. Then something shifted. The grief turned into steel. I stopped asking what I'd lost. I started thinking about what they'd taken. I rented a small mobile home a few miles away, paid in cash, told the manager I was doing a long-term engineering survey. From there, I went silent. No lawyers, no yelling, just research. I spent every day in the records office pouring through old plats, dusty maps, and deeds from the 1980s. Most people would have quit too much paperwork, too confusing. I wasn't most people, I was an engineer. 5 days in, I found it a hand-drawn survey dated 1982. Finch Lake Estates was divided into numbered parcels neat as a checkerboard. Except one. The lakefront tract, the one my cabin sat on, was marked differently. It wasn't part of the subdivision. My pulse quickened. That meant HOA jurisdiction didn't apply there. My father's property was independent. Then I found the bigger document, the Finch Lake County Land Trust created by Robert Bannon, 1983. Buried deep inside a clause titled Contingent Ownership and Fiduciary Transfer. I read it twice, then a third time. If the HOA or its members ever violated the private rights of the original parcel, or used their authority to encumber it control of the entire land trust, including the lake access points and common areas, would transfer to the grantor's legal heir. Me. I remember leaning back in that hard wooden chair staring at the ceiling. My father. He'd built a legal landmine and waited 40 years for someone arrogant enough to step on it. I drove out to meet a man named Alistair Finch, a retired county surveyor who'd worked with Dad back in the day. His workshop smelled like sawdust and motor oil. I laid the map on his bench. He studied it for a long time, then grinned. "Bob Bannon," he said. "Stubborn, old son of a gun. Told me someday these HOA folks would come for his cabin. Looks like they did." We shook hands, then they just triggered the wire, I said. Next step, rebuild the battlefield. I called Tomas, an old army buddy turned carpenter. "Joe, I haven't heard that voice in a decade," he said. I told him the whole story. His laugh was low and dangerous. "A Karen tore down your cabin." "Oh, buddy, I'm bringing tools." 3 days later, he arrived with a truck full of lumber and coffee. We fenced the property, cleaned debris, and worked quietly. People slowed their cars to stare, but no one dared stop. Then came the call that changed everything. A soft voice on the line. "Mr. Bannon, this is Millie, from the records office." She was the young clerk from that day. What happened wasn't right. That older woman is Darla's sister-in-law. They've been running scams for years, fake emergency fees, forged permits, pocketing cash. Your father's cabin was the last private holdout on the lake. They needed it gone to sell the shoreline to a condo developer. So it wasn't about rules, it was about money. My blood boiled. "Can you prove it?" I asked. "I can," she said, "and I will." For weeks we gathered evidence, bank records, invoices, signed contracts. But suing them would take years. I needed something faster, public, undeniable. So I filed for a permit to host a community restoration workshop open to residents, free to attend, fully legal. Tomas and I set the date, printed flyers, and spread the word. The Saturday of the event, the county road was lined with cars. Families carried tool belts and casserole dishes. We turned the ruins into a work site. Hammers rang out where a bulldozer had once howled. The energy was electric. People were taking back their lake. Around noon, Darla showed up, flanked by Hal Dorsey, her enforcer, a retired security guard with mirrored shades and too much ego. They strutted through the gate like cops on patrol. She gave me that same icy smile. "Mr. Bannon, I hope you understand you're violating several—" Actually, I cut in, unfolding the old trust document. "I think it's you who violated something." She frowned, scanning the dense legal text. "This, some dusty old relic, meaningless." "Maybe," I said, holding up my phone, "except my lawyer just filed it with the county. It's official. The Finch Lake Land Trust now recognizes me as its sole controlling heir." Her smile vanished. I kept going. "That means the HOA's access to the lake, the docks, the entire shoreline runs through my authority now. You didn't just demolish my cabin, Darla. You demolished your own leash." For the first time, she looked unsure. Around us, the crowd went quiet. Someone whispered, "Wait, he owns the lake?" Another voice answered, "Holy hell." She tried to recover. "You're bluffing," she hissed. "Maybe," I said. "But bluffing doesn't make your forged permit disappear." That night, a certified letter appeared taped to my gate, a summons to an emergency HOA meeting open to the public. I smiled. Perfect. The meeting room was packed wall to wall, neighbors, reporters, even the county clerk's office. Darla and her board sat behind a folding table, faces pale under fluorescent lights. She banged her gavel. "We will restore order," she said, voice shaking. Then she launched into a rehearsed speech, blaming me for disrupting community harmony. When she finally asked for questions, I walked to the front, slow and deliberate. "Ma'am," I said calmly, "let's talk about harmony." I pulled out a small recorder and hit play. Her own voice filled the room. "Those petunias are an unauthorized color. Eleanor, you have 48 hours to remove them or I'll lien your house." The gasp that went through the room was like a wave breaking. An old woman in the front row, Mrs. Gable, covered her face and started crying. I laid down a stack of documents. "Here are your emergency repair invoices," I said, and next to them, real contractor receipts. "You charged Mr. Henderson $1,000 for a sidewalk repair that cost $65. You billed $5,000 for an algae treatment that never happened." Anger rolled through the crowd, building fast. People stood shouting questions. I raised my voice just enough to cut through the noise. "But that's not all. Here's why you needed my father's cabin gone." I held up a single sheet, the preliminary sales contract between the HOA and a luxury developer. "You were selling the community's lake access to build condos and a private marina and cashing out with consulting fees." The room exploded. Hal looked like he might faint. Darla's face went bloodless. "You have no right," she started. I slammed the stamped trust papers on the table. "I have every right. This document says your HOA's authority ended the second you trespassed on my property. You didn't just overstep, you disqualified yourselves." Silence. Then Alastair Finch stood from the back, voice booming. "I move for an immediate vote of no confidence in this board." The crowd roared in agreement. Hands shot up, every single one. The door opened behind us. 2 sheriff's deputies stepped in. I turned to them, handed over the folder containing the forged permits and falsified invoices. "These belong to her," I said. One deputy flipped through the pages, nodded once, then looked at Darla. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us." Her eyes darted around wild, searching for help that wasn't there. The crowd parted as they cuffed her wrists. I stepped close enough for only her to hear. "Your clipboard's in Lost and Found," I whispered. She didn't look back. And just like that, the Queen of Finch Lake fell, her castle built on lies and fines and fake smiles collapsing in one public meeting. When the door closed behind her, the room stayed silent for a long time. Not because of shock, but because everyone there knew something irreversible had just happened. I walked out into the cool night air, the lake stretching out under the moon. For the first time in my life, I felt like I'd finally heard what my father had been trying to say all along. "Don't let anyone bulldoze what's yours, especially your peace."